Hello and welcome to today's session. My name is Micheál McGrath. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Visible Thread. I hope you're enjoying Optimize. If this is your very first session, welcome. It's been an incredible, yesterday was a phenomenal day of content, and we already had a session this morning with an Australian panel. So it's just been a fabulous kind of collection of impactful content and engaging stories. Yeah, we've really enjoyed it. So we're very thankful to all the speakers and all the attendees that have turned up over the last 24 hours. Today we're going to continue on our conversation about the RFP lifecycle. Yesterday we approached opportunity assessment, we approached capture, and now we're talking a lot about preparing for the RFP process. So preparing for proposals into preparation, and later towards afternoon, we'll be talking about post-award. So we have lots of great speakers. We have Bassila here today to talk about technology and AI and automation and how it fits into the RFP lifecycle. Before we get started, and before I pass you over to Chris, I'd love to understand, is this a brand new audience from yesterday, or did you attend? So, or is this your first optimized presentation? Feel free to click the slides, so you can actually click directly on the slides here, and so I can see some people clicking already. When we get to kind of a decent percentage here, I'll move on and show the results. That's great. So people are clicking, and just while people are doing this, I want to explain that if you missed some of yesterday, or if you would like the slides and recordings, we'll be sharing everything after the event. So everything is free and on demand. You can still register. So if there's colleagues in your team, or if you'd like to share the event, we'd be delighted. What you do. Okay, so majority of people, so 80% were here yesterday. So you know the story, you know what's going on. Just so you know, all the agenda is on the optimized landing page. You'll be able to select all the sections there. Immediately after this session, you'll be redirected to the next session. And as I said, all recordings will be available after. The last thing I will say is we'd love this to be as interactive as possible. So I'm going to pass you over to Chris. If you have any questions, feel free to be in the attendee chat or in the Q&A box. We'll do our best to come to as many questions as we can at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Bassila. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Micheál? Thanks for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here talking about this topic. So thanks for the invitation.
You're very welcome, Chris. As I said at the beginning, if you have any questions for Chris, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or into the attendee chat, and we'll try to tackle as many as possible. So, Chris, I'll let you go.
Thank you. Thanks, Micheál. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. Sorry, I have to apologize. My camera is not working this morning, so this is not a recording. It's just some IT issues. So a quick introduction. My name is Chris Bassila. I'm the CEO of Hovester Advisory Group. We're a niche consulting firm. We help companies in the aerospace and defense, as well as the AEC industries, win more bids, increase revenue profitably, and scale their business efficiently. We do this by assisting and responding to complex bids, optimize the bid function, and strategically implementing AI and automation tool. So that's the quick introduction. For myself, I spent over 20 years in the aerospace and defense industry, taking on various roles from engineering, technology, strategic operations, and competitive intelligence. And I would say that that diverse experience has given me a sort of a unique vantage point in terms of looking at the full picture, not just challenges in isolation. And I am hoping to share some of this experience with you today and talk about how I have used technology and automation across the RFP lifecycle. As Micheál said, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat or leave them towards the end. I won't be presenting for the full hour, probably 30 minutes, and we'll leave some time. So I'm hoping to make this interactive. I'm also dropping a link if you need to download a resource, a free resource as well. We'll talk about that during the presentation. So let's get started. So 2 years ago, just to give you a bit of perspective where I'm coming from, 2 years ago when generative AI tools start flooding the market, I decided to get serious about understanding how they could help with bids and proposals. But clear, practical guidance back then was nearly impossible to find. There were no frameworks and no best practices, just a lot of noise. So, I did the logical thing and I reached out to one of the few thought leaders back then who was posting about AI and proposals on LinkedIn regularly. And I figured, here's someone who's done the work, someone who might give me a real advice. Instead, what I got was a pitch, a sales pitch. No real insight, just a push to buy the tool the person was building. So that was my first of many lessons. Not every expert is objective, and tools, no matter how smart they seem, won't solve all your proposal problems. What also became clear to me is that success doesn't come from chasing shiny tools. It comes from thinking critically about where AI and automation actually create value and building a smarter path that aligns with your real business needs. That experience shaped the perspective I'm bringing you today. So what I'm hoping today is you walk away with three things. One is a clear view on where AI and automation deliver real impact across the RFP lifecycle. Number two, I'd like to give you a practical adoption path without no hype, noise, or wasted effort. And number three, I want to leave you with some strategic frameworks to help you streamline, scale, and stay competitive. So that's kind of the goal and my promise for today. So before we dive into frameworks and strategy, let's pause and look at what the data actually tells us about AI in bids and proposals. So back in October 2023, Strategic Proposals, it's a leading UK consulting firm, released the first real vendor independent research report into the use of AI in our professions, the age of innocence. You see it here. There's a link as well if you want to have a look. And what it revealed is a mix of optimism and hesitation, I would say. Back then, that was a year and a half ago, seems like ages, 59% of respondents said that AI is the most exciting thing to happen in bidding in years. And I think that's not surprising. We've all seen how powerful generative AI can be. But at the same time, 22% said they're worried about how AI can take away their job. The report also showed deep vendor skepticism. 73% of respondents felt that buying from AI vendors was risky. And 65% said there's too much talk about AI, and most of it is coming from vendors pushing for their own tools. That skepticism, in my opinion, is healthy, and it's a big reason why frameworks like the one I'll show you today matter so much. Now, interestingly also, the same report showed early signs of adoption. 55% of organizations said they've already started using AI in their bid process. But I think it's mostly lightweight. So thinking about ChatGPT, we all work on that with like summarizing stuff, Teams meeting transcript, maybe you've used Grammarly. I know I have. And what we're not seeing yet is a structured scale adoption tied to business outcome. And that's the gap I'd like to talk about today. And also one other piece of data, it's a recent Forbes study from late 2024. And it highlights that the common use cases for generative AI, this is not just in bids and proposal, this is across industries, right? And what they said, the top three were document and proposal writing or editing, summarizing meetings and documents, 59%, and marketing content creation to support positioning, 48%, or 58%, I should say. So in short, the point I'm driving here is that the opportunity is obvious, but the path forward isn't. People need clarity, not more features. And thirdly, AI is being used to save time. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not creating a real competitive advantage yet, in my opinion. In other words, no one really is interested in writing losing bids faster. And what we're going to talk about today is identifying where AI truly creates value in the bid process. So when we think about AI, it's tempting to treat it like a magic bullet, something you can apply across the entire RFP lifecycle and expect transformational results. But the truth is more nuanced, because AI's value is highly dependent on where you apply it. And that's why I created this AI opportunity map. It's not a technical model. It's just a practical compass to help bid teams identify where AI and automation can meaningfully add value. So let's look at it very quickly. The maps break the RFP lifecycle into 4 critical areas: proposal development on the top right, proposal strategy on the bottom right, capture strategy, and decision support. And it also overlays 2 core dimensions. So horizontally, you go from insight and strategy enablement to automation. On the vertical, you go from efficiency and process enhancement to strategic thinking and content shaping. And the goal here is to use AI where you have the most friction, waste, or missed opportunity. So if we go through the quadrants, so proposal development, we're all very familiar with that. This is where currently, I'm very confident to say that this is where the most technology lives today. This is what you hear about a lot on LinkedIn and other places. So you think about content drafting, formatting, compliance matrices, security questionnaires, typically high volume and high repetitive tasks where AI can accelerate production and reduce manual effort. So there are obvious use cases here, and consequently a very crowded market from a vendor perspective. The other one is proposal strategy. I think this is where AI helps us sharpen the narrative by extracting win themes, refining differentiators, or aligning the value proposition to the customer's language. Fewer tools live here, but this is where I think message quality and impact start to change. If we move on to capture strategy, this quadrant is about insight generation. You can think about customer hot buttons, competitive intelligence, SWOT analysis. AI can be used here to mine public data, synthesize win-loss lessons, or summarize buyer behavior before the RFP drops. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm going through this quickly so you can get a sense of the different use cases and applications. And then there's decision support. Here, AI can improve how you decide which bid to chase, using historical performance data, qualification models, pricing patterns, or resource load forecasting. It's not flashy, but this is where AI can quietly protect your margin and focus. So as a guidance, I would say start by identifying the quadrant where you see the most value for your team. This is your first step. The next step is to drill down and ask yourself, what are we really trying to achieve? For example, are we trying to accelerate storyboarding? Are we trying to automate compliance matrices? Are we trying to generate better competitive insight? And so these are some of the questions that you want to ask yourself upfront and get clarity. Because once we get clarity, we can match the right type of tool to the use case, not just default to whatever is trending on LinkedIn. The idea here is to focus the conversation, again, not on hype or feature list, but on strategic impact across the bid lifecycle. And so my last takeaway for this slide is the smartest team, what I've seen, aren't using the most AI. They're using AI where it really matters the most. Okay, now that we've explored where AI and automation can add value, let's look at how the technology landscape aligns with the RFP process. The bid lifecycle, from lead identification to capture to proposal development, as you know, isn't a single unified process, right? Each phase has distinct needs, each require different type of intelligence and automation, really to move from insight to action and submitting a winning proposal. So this slide here introduces 4 categories of what I call purpose-built solutions, each aligned to a different type of support. So if you look at the competitive intelligence tools like Crayon, Clue, Quantify, and CompKind, there's others, of course. I just want to give you a sense of, some of the most popular ones. They really help you understand and monitor your competitors so you can better position against them, right? Competitive intelligence is very important in bids and proposals, as we all know. Then there's market intelligence platform, such as AlphaSense, CB Insight, and Commentelli. They really help you stay ahead of customer priorities and market signals and policy changes. This is more of a macro view of things, right? And the third category right beneath that is business intelligence tools like Power BI, Tableau, Domo. These are, they help you analyze your own data. So this is more like an internal looking view on things. So past performance, pricing trends in the past, team utilization, to help you really drive internal decision-making. And finally, last but not least, the rapidly growing category of what I call the bid response platforms or tools or solutions. We'll talk about different categories in a moment. These tools really help you automate and streamline everything from drafting answers to managing libraries, accelerating content creation. This is where most RFP, like I said, tech vendors, are in that. I've come across, and I put, just some of the logos. There's a lot more, but just to give you a sense, there's so much space on the presentation here on the slide, but it gives you a sense of kind of like how many vendors or tools are out there, right? So a couple of important note or caveats, right? Not all platforms fit in a single category. So some of them, will straddle multiple 2 or 3 categories. Even in the bid response, I've seen some, help with competitive intelligence or market intelligence, so on and so forth, right? So that's one important thing. This is not like a clear binary box. Some general purpose AI assistant like ChatGPT, Claude, or Microsoft Copilot are also being used across the board. So, they summarize meetings, they're drafting sections, they're organizing competitive research. These assistants are accessible and flexible. And for many teams, this is where the AI journey begins. Now, with that being said, there's a note here that these, available, let's take ChatGPT, which we're all familiar with, they use generative AI. Okay, there are many different type of AI. There's machine learning, there's natural language processing, there's predictive AI, there's rule-based AI, they may name it, right? So Gen AI is only one subcategory, and it's not suitable for all the tasks and the use cases I've just laid out before. So that's something to keep in mind on your journey. If ever you're evaluating tools, think about what's the underlying technology that you're purchasing for what purpose, right? Another word of caution is you should never feed these public LLMs, ChatGPT, for example, with sensitive or confidential information. This is especially true in proposal work where we have proprietary pricing, staffing plans, client details. It's critical to treat these assistants as open platforms. So whatever you put in becomes available to anybody. So unless you have a secured enterprise-grade type of instance, then you can start putting more information. But I'd be very cautious. Speak to your IT team. So, in short, LLMs and generative AI are useful, but they're not without risk. And tool selection must be really aligned with the phase of the RFP process and the sensitivity of the work involved. And this is why, in the next slide, we're going to take this a step further. And I would like to actually map these platform types to the RFP lifecycle to make it more concrete, bring it kind of together, and show some of the deliverables they enable. And really, again, the next slide is just an example. It's not really, a comprehensive list. Okay, so like I said, we've talked about where AI creates value, how purpose-built tools and platforms align to different phases of the RFP lifecycle. This table shows that alignment with some examples. This is obviously, again, as I mentioned, not a comprehensive list. So let's walk it through phase by phase and highlight the type of deliverables we can expect each category of platform to deliver. So if we look at, like, on the left-hand side, lead identification at the very top. So that's the very top of the funnel. During lead identification, we're still shaping our understanding of whether we should even pursue an opportunity. And the first vertical here, competitive intelligence platforms, they help you uncover emerging competitors or adjacent players who are singly intent to move into that space. So there's a lot of interesting use cases there with competitive intelligence tools. The market intelligence tools in this particular phase, they help you understand customer priorities, identify early market shift, or validate timing through opportunity qualification. And really, I would say at this stage, BI and bid response tools are not yet in play, really. This is more of an awareness and positioning phase. So this is just an example of where lead identification maps with different platforms, right? Then if you go to capture phase, this is where things start to get tactical and strategic at the same time. So we're shaping win themes, deciding on pursuit strategies, and making resource allocation decisions. CI platforms, in this case, help with win analysis, price to win, ghosting the competition, and running black hat reviews, so competitive benchmarking. Market intelligence can help you surface customer pain points, drive capture, prioritization, and perhaps support SWOT analysis. It's particularly valuable for understanding where we fit in the big picture. And here we can start looking at business intelligence tools that add value by analyzing internal past performance, surfacing pricing trends, and supporting the bid no bid decision with actual data. And finally, the bid response platform at this point, are used, mainly for content planning and knowledge library preparation. When the RFP hits, you're not scrambling. Again, there's probably other use cases. Again, I'm just trying to give you a flavor of what you can expect and how you can think about technology and solutions. And finally, for the proposal development stage, CI helps refine your win themes and differentiators. Market intelligence tools will help you fine-tune the messagings, things like customer hot buttons, win themes, or preemptively addressing risk mitigation. If we continue to the business intelligence platforms, this will support decision on resource allocation, lessons learned from the past, and again, help with providing win-loss analysis. Again, this is internal data. Think about business intelligence as, internal data that you're trying to use to make decisions and help you in your bid cycle. And finally, bid response tools and proposal development. Here's again where you see the biggest convergence of tools and platforms. Some examples would be handling first draft, building compliance matrices, structuring executive summaries, and even managing CVs, for example, or past performance narratives. So as you can see, from this slide, each platform plays a different role depending on where you are in the RFP lifecycle. The mistake I see too often is teams investing in the wrong tool for the phase they're trying to improve. They expect, for example, a content library to solve a strategy gap. That's not going to happen, right? Or they try to generate competitive intelligence using tools built for formatting responses, for example. So there's a lot of confusion there, I would say. And again, the real opportunity isn't about using more tool. It's about using the right solution at the right stage for the right outcome. And I say, if you get that alignment right, you really start getting traction. You build momentum. And most importantly, you start creating real value with technology. That's what I've seen anyway. All right. With that being said, let's go to the next slide. Again, here, before I want to take a pause, and before we go any further in the presentation, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is AI adoption. Because here's the reality. Actual adoption of AI in bidding is still, in my opinion, very limited. So my question to you is, where are you in your AI adoption journey? Are you experimenting with LLMs, ChatGPT type of solutions? Are you drowning in disconnected tools? Are you ready for platform level implementation? Or perhaps you're already implemented the commercial AI solutions. But really, regardless where you are, here's another data points from Strategic Proposal's latest research from December 24. You should check it out. There's a link there. Quite interesting and insightful, I would say. So even though the potential is clear, only about 24% of organizations have started using generative AI in their bid and proposal processes. But you're like, wait a minute. Earlier in the session, we talked about Gen AI is already, proving effective for things like drafting proposals, summarizing meetings, creating positioning content. I also mentioned the Forbes article, which makes it very clear that the use cases are there. So it's suffice to say that there's a gap. But why is the gap? This is the question. And it's not because teams don't care. It's not because people don't care. It's really because AI adoption is messy. And even among those who have started adoption is often unstructured, right? So again, some data for you to think about from the report is 83% say that they don't have a clear framework or structured approach for using AI. And only 17% are actively tracking your return on investment. That number is mind-boggling for me. You buy a car, you make any investment, you should be tracking your return on investment, right? And only 44% have provided internal guidance or training for their teams. And I think I'll talk about training at the end of the presentation because it's important. But I find that it's very daunting. I think when you buy a tool and then expect people to just self-train and with little guidance. So if your team is still experimenting, cautious, or even overwhelmed, my message to you is you're not alone, right? Because what I've seen, there are major barriers still remain, even 2.5 years into ChatGPT. So one is, for example, information security risks. Like I said, don't feed LLMs proprietary data. So that's also a big issue that we've seen across the board. And there's also challenges integrating AI into established workflows. So this is what you should think about, how much disruption these tools are bringing to your organization. Of course, there's more value than not having them, but there's also a disruption. You have to rethink your processes, your workflows. It's big, right? And there's also uncertainty around return on investment. Obviously, if you're not tracking your return on investment, it's hard to make the case that we should reinvest in a tool. And also, there's a general lack of trusted, independent advice, with so many organizations relying on vendor marketing or informal networks for information. So again, the point here is that the opportunity is real, but the adoption journey is not simple. And the problem isn't lack of interest, is lack of clarity. So what I have observed is that more organizations are still figuring out how to adopt it safely, consistently, in ways that align with real business goals. And so unlike what some influencers or vendors would like you have you believe, you're not failing or falling behind. You are navigating a space that's still evolving, still noisy, and often lacks trusted guidance. And that's why structure is very important. Now, why is adoption so confusing? I just spent a few minutes talking about adoption, and how can we make it practical? So we hear, and this is a framework I'd like to share with you and spend some time talking about this because this is very important, I think. We hear AI thrown around constantly, but most people lump it together, AI and automation. It's almost synonymous, like, oh, I'm using AI for automation. It's like interchangeable. And this is not always the case. So this framework breaks it down for us, right? Along the x-axis, we have automation. And the way I define automation is how much of the task the system actually performs for you with minimal human intervention. And along the y-axis, we have integration. And again, my simplest definition is how well the tool fits into your workflow and systems at a very basic level. And most people assume that integration and automation go hand in hand, that one naturally drives the other, right? But that's not always the case. For example, you might have an RFP response platform that integrates well with your CRM and SharePoints and improve collaboration, but that doesn't actually generate long-form content narrative, right? On the flip side, you might have a standalone tool that automates the creation of resumes, CVs, or case studies, and yet operates entirely outside of your system with little integration. So, personally, I don't know if you've ever used an AI note taker to summarize your meeting notes. I know I use it all the time, every single meeting. And this is very helpful for me. It's really helping me save a lot of time because it automates a lot, but it doesn't integrate it with my files. I have to download the file afterwards from the platform, read it, I put it in SharePoint, so on and so forth, right? So the point here is that tools and platforms aren't mutually exclusive categories. So that's very important to note, right? It's not one or the other. They exist along a spectrum. This framework, again, isn't about forcing a binary label, but rather helping teams understand where a solution falls based on two key dimensions. And the two key dimension is, to what degree is it automated or automating tasks? And the second one is, to what degree is it integrated into your workflows and systems? What I've seen is some solutions start as tools and evolve into platforms. Others offer both integrated features and isolated automation, depending on how they're deployed, right? So while the lines can blur sometimes, I personally find this framework very useful when advising my clients on AI automation tools, because it gives you a structured way to analyze the market, compare options, and more importantly, choose the right type of solution for the specific problem you're trying to solve. This is a theme that I keep talking about all the time, defining a problem and finding a solution for that specific problem. So let's go through the quadrants just to give you a sense. So at the bottom left, this is where most AI adoption actually begins. This is the AI assistant. And when I start my journey, when I discovered ChatGPT, I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? So oftentimes people will start here. This is an assistant quadrant, right? So they offer low automation and low integration, but still create a lot of value. However, use ChatGPT for whatever is your use case. You want to plan a trip, or you want to cook a meal, or whatever. It feels like magic, right? So, but for us, think about those general purpose AI, like, for example, ChatGPT, Claude, and Grammarly. I could have populated this with different logos for different companies. I purposely chose not to, but we can talk about that. I want to have people's permission before putting different logos in different quadrants, but I'm comfortable putting ChatGPT in that category. So again, these tools don't plug into your system, and they won't automate any processes, but they're extremely useful for lightweight, high leverage tasks like drafting a first response to generate questions, or summarizing dense reference documents, or I don't know, rewriting boilerplate for tone, clarity, structure. So the key benefit here is they're easy to access, low risk to experiment with, and require really no operational change. They give proposal professionals like superpowers, not by replacing them, of course, but by accelerating the tasks that eat up time and energy. Again, you're still copying and pasting in and out. You're still manually reviewing outputs, but you're doing it faster and with a clearer, for example, first draft, and fewer, those blank page moments, the tyranny of the blank page. And this is, I think, why most successful AI adoption starts here. So, if you're really beginning your journey, you haven't heard about AI, I'll strongly encourage you to start experimenting in that quadrant. Then let's move on to the bottom right, AI tools. These are, for the purpose of this explanation, let's call them single purpose automation tools. So a tool that can scan your RFPs and auto generates a compliance matrix, a browser app that fills answers from a preloaded knowledge base, or a plugin that reformats CVs in seconds, for example. So to push this example a bit further, and something that we're familiar with here, is, for example, compliance matrix automation. So traditionally, what you have is a proposal coordinator manually scans the RFP. At least that's what I've seen. They copies each requirement into a spreadsheet. They then cross-reference it with sections of the proposals. They assign owners and status updates by hand. And so with automation, so this is the before. Now imagine a world with a tool automation, with task automation. The tool would automatically parses the RFP, extracts all the requirements, builds the compliance matrix in Excel or other format, flags duplicates or ambiguities. These are very powerful automation cases, right? Even if they live outside your workflow, and they could live inside your workflow, even if you're copying, pasting, and uploading documents, it's still a very, very compelling use case, right? So just an example of, type of tools you can find there. Then if we go to platforms, platforms are really built into your process. So think about, for example, Loopio or Rocket Docs, a structured content library in collaborative environments, right? They're built for collaboration, consistency, and compliance. You're really not automating, long narrative type of responses. They're not meant for that anyway. But you're working from a shared system with rules, version control, and visibility. So your team works on multiple proposals at once, often reusing bios and project descriptions and boilerplate and executive summaries. And without that structure, people would waste a lot of hours hunting through past files or asking colleagues for information. So with a platform, what you see is, for example, approved content is stored in a central searchable knowledge library. SMEs and proposal writers can tag content by topic, vertical, client. Content can be reviewed, version controlled, and auto-expired if outdated. And proposal templates and workflows are standardized across the team. So pretty compelling if that's what you're into. So again, you're not automating writing, but you're drastically reducing friction, version confusion, and rework. So these platforms, again, they integrate with your workflow and systems. They help manage collaboration and support consistency at scale. So for many mature teams and some type of low bit complexity, I would say, this could be the backbone of your proposal operation. And then my favorite now, I hear talk about hype is AI agents, right? This is where we get the most advanced, and I say most misunderstood quadrant is the AI agents. Why? Because the promise is very compelling, right? So think about it for a second. Imagine a world where like a system or an agent reads the RFP, generates a draft, matches past performance, flags the gaps, builds the first version of your executive summary, and uploads it into your SharePoint library. Wow, like this sounds great. Like sign me up, right? This sounds really cool. But here's fundamentally the problem with that currently, with the current technology, is that agents, as you see on this chart, this framework, they require both high automation and deep integration, right, for it to work. So they're on the top right. And doing what I've seen is doing one of those well is hard. It takes sometimes months and years, more years than months. Doing both together, I'd say it's nearly impossible unless your organization is already very mature. I'll talk about that in a second here, when to move from one to the other. So I think this is where I label it, the crash site of premature automation. And that's why many AI journeys that start with AI agents, in my opinion, will fail. So, if AI agents are adopted too early, you're really automating chaos, and you probably don't want to do that. We have enough on our plates. All right, so, that being said, what would be like a smarter adoption path? So let's talk about when it actually makes sense to move from tools to platform to agents. This is a bigger discussion to be had, but I'll try to synthesize this in the table here. So tools make sense, I would say, when you want quick wins for specific isolated tasks like generating a compliance matrix or cleaning up a CV or proposal. There's many, many use cases there, and they have a lot of value, right? So the other point is, don't get the impression that one is better than the other. You might want to use tools forever, and that's fine, or you want to be on a platform. It doesn't really matter, right? So it's a case by case. And platforms really become critical when you have, I think, multiple contributors and you need structure, content library, workflow management, and collaboration at scale. That's kind of what you hear right now. People talk about, when you talk about platform, this is what they're thinking, right? And agents, though, if you want to get to that, and this is where I don't recommend starting with agents, unless, you have very specific, you're very clear on what you need, and you're very specific. For example, you need well-documented workflows, no guessing what the steps are. You have to have the workflows nailed down, right? You need also clean, structured data, so the agent has good information to work with. Like the agent is going to pull information from somewhere, right? AI is not magic. It doesn't know, which content is better magically, right? So you need to have good structured data. And more than structured data, I think you need to have clear governance. So by that, I mean strong rules around what gets submitted, what gets reviewed, and what gets modified. You also need simple and standardized bid types, I would say low complexity, such as responding to security questionnaire, completing registration form, or really low complexity vendor portals type of like Q&A. Again, this is where the technology is today. This might evolve in the past. This presentation might not age very well in a year or two, but currently where the technology is, it's better suited. AI agents are best suited for low complexity bid. And also I would say low variability in your workflows, meaning if every bid looks widely different from the next one, agent will struggle. So if bids are formulaic, agents will thrive. So this is kind of how you should think about it as well. And I cannot stress enough is that you need a human in the loop. Teams that ready to audit, verify, and finalize what the agents produces. So there's no agents right now that can give, you press a button and gives you a completed RFP. This does not exist right now. So without all of these in place, agents tend to create more problems than they solve. Missed requirements, compliance issues, tone mismatch, and costly rework. So the takeaway here for me is simple. Build a strong foundation first, move into agents only when your organization is truly ready for it. Okay, here, if you're starting your journey, I'd like to offer you a 5-step approach, very simple. I also left a link. There's resources if you want to download, written white paper and other things you can download if you'd like. It's in the chat, but you can go also on my website. But for the sake of this, if you're starting your journey, I would say there's 5 steps you can follow that is going to help you a lot. So the first one is to set goals. So start by clear defining what you're trying to improve. And here you can use the AI opportunity map I presented earlier. It's really helpful exercise. Again, things that you want to ask yourself is it, I'm looking for faster content generation, or am I looking to reduce SME time? Am I looking for better consistency in my writing? because if you can't define success up front, you won't be able to prove the value later, right? You're just going to spin your wheels, and you're going to exercise folks that are already very busy in their days. And this is not like a guessing game. So your goals really drive tool selection. Use case prioritization is important, and how you evaluate results. The second step is, I would say, don't start by using AI. Start by identifying your specific task, what I call use cases to improve. Again, this could be generating first draft or bios, or summarizing long documents, harmonizing a single tone of voice, whatever the case might be for yourself. You have to decide what will give you immediate relief without derailing your current workflow. And step number 3, I would say, is the train and upskill. This step is critical and often skipped, is what I've seen. So, give your teams hands-on experience, exposure, examples, and usage guidance, right? How should we use this tool? If you drop a tool without a context, people default back to what they do. It's normal. We've all done this. I wouldn't expect it to be any other way. So, I really cannot emphasize enough. Again, a core team for me for AI is change management is really a key success factor for success. Number 4 is to demonstrate proof of value. So, once you've picked a use case or two, you run a pilot, and then what you do is measure results, measure your ROI against your original goals. So how much did we save? Did the content quality go up or down? Did SME spend more time or less time reviewing? This is where you start building confidence, both in the tool and in the people. And lastly, I would say establish feedback loops. AI deployment isn't a one and done exercise. You need feedback system to learn what's working, what's not, where to improve. Some metrics I would suggest is tracking usage, capturing SME comments. This is qualitative but important, and documenting the AI performance over time. So the goal, really, from this 5-step is really to de-risk your future deployment by learning as you go. So whether you're starting with Assistant, piloting a new proposal tool, or preparing to adopt a platform, I think this approach will keep you grounded. Because it does reduce risk and align with your team and helps you scale with confidence. Now, let's wrap things up. I'll leave you with 5 key takeaways for this presentation. First is clarity breeds success. In a space full of hype and noise, being clear on what you need and why is key. Number 2 is, I would say, adoption is a journey, not a leap. So you want sustainable success with AI. This is not about jumping with the most advanced tool. It's really about taking the right step at the right time. Third is, most team I would suggest they start small with low risk, high impact use cases, and then build internal momentum and confidence. Fourth is, you can use a framework like the one I'm suggested, the AI automation framework or the journey map, to really understand, where you are, and what solution works best for you, what type of solution, what type of technology that we need to help us, right? And finally, what I've seen is that AI adds value across the proposal lifecycle, but not everywhere equally. So again, the smartest bids don't use the most AI, they use where it matters the most. And in closing remarks, I'll finish this presentation the way I started, just talking about my journey. My journey started with one simple question: where do I even begin, right? And like many of you, I found myself flooded with tools, buzzwords, and half answers. I didn't find clarity in tech, that's for sure. Clarity was not, illuminating. I found it by stepping back and asking a different question. The question I ask is, what actually helps teams do better work with less stress, more focus, and fewer late nights? And that's what I hope this session offered. Not just a strategy for AI adoption, but really a way to make the proposal work a little more thoughtful, a little more sustainable, and a lot more human. You don't need to adopt everything. You just need to adopt what makes the work, and the experience better. Thank you for your time. And Michal, we can open up for questions if people have questions. I'd love to have a conversation. We have 15 minutes left, so I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well said. And I really, kind of a great story from start to finish. I think a lot of people found that very valuable. I want to highlight the Q&A box. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in. There's already some questions in there, Chris. So I'll start with one from Andrew. He points out to a quote that he heard from. He points out from a quote from one of his previous CEOs, or a CEO from a leading vendor. He said that 90% of people who need proposal software will never buy it. Andrew still feels this is kind of true today, but why is there so many new entrants of software into the market? What's kind of driving this hype of new vendors into the proposal market?
Very good question. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. In my opinion, the reason you have so many vendors in our bid response market is because the low barriers to entry. What I mean by that is the cost for, to get into this market. You get two people sitting in their garage and they take a large language model and they put an interface to it, and now it starts to generate, use cases for bids and proposal. But then we don't need that. Like I can go to ChatGPT if I want and they get answers. That's not really the value. And this is where I saw really the shift at the beginning. Everybody was talking about, let's automate, let's get the first draft faster. But really, I think the point was missed in that, like, your goal is not to get the fast losing bid, is to really get a winning bid. And then this is why I exposed the idea of competitive intelligence tools and market intelligence tool and business intelligence tools. The picture is much bigger. And we know that when an RFP drops, like, your chances of shaping it or winning it is lower, much lower than if you work on the capture phase, which requires a different set of tools and technologies. And I see now a shift in vendors also moving upstream, I would say, and trying to look at decision support, qualification, bid, no bid, so on and so forth. But to answer the question simply is that really the barriers to entry are very low if you want to start with spin up a tool and market it as a business response. I see this like every week or every other week there's a new vendor that comes in, and I think it's a very saturated market, and we'll consolidate in in the next 12 months. I would say you're going to get a lot less tools and vendors.
Absolutely. And even from my own perspective, like it's kind of the Simon Sinek idea of the law of diffusion, where there's always going to be laggards. There's always people that are, we're going to do it this way. It works fine for us. This is our process. It's going to take a lot to convince them. But I do see a shift. Like there is certainly a shift. Maybe AI is pushing that shift a little bit in all these new vendors and the different functionality and all this kind of stuff that's now possible. But there definitely is. When I look at AP&P events and I look at events like this and the questions that we get asked, there's definitely more curious people out there. And when there's curious people, there's innovators, and people will find solutions to problems.
Yeah.
So I'm inspired by today and yesterday and AP&P events and other events. Yeah, people are certainly taking a turn when it comes to tech and software in this industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think, Michal, just to add on that, I think what is required is a clarity, because a confused mind doesn't buy and doesn't adopt, right? And you hear a lot of noise, and I was drowning in that noise for a little while. So, I hope I salute, Visible Threat for putting on an event like that to help diffuse the knowledge and get people understanding a little more how this works and all that. So I'm very excited about that. I hope we have more of these events.
Absolutely, and it's like things are changing so rapidly. I think it's necessary. We had a conversation this morning with Nigel Dennis from BidRight in Australia, and he's wrote a wonderful white paper on the myths of AI. He's talking about the one button press and the RFP is done kind of scenario. So it is really like education in this market is really important, and I think people are clever enough to understand that. And yeah, I think there's some great content out there. I know you're looking for something there.
Yeah, I saw a question from Patricia, my name, so I thought I'd put the first slide. So Patricia, my name is Chris Bassila. Easy to find on LinkedIn if you want to connect. Love to have a chat.
Very good.
So yeah, that's why I went back to this.
No problem at all. And then there's another question, Chris, that's why. Okay, why is it that every implementation of proposal software typically fails because of low internal adoption? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer to that is, if you take a step back, I'll answer this question, but like most, IT transformation, I'd say 80% fail, right? And what you come to realize for AI specifically at business proposal is that adoption is not about the technology, it's about the change management. And I think across the board, we don't do a very good job in terms of change management, because the reality is companies don't transform at the rate of technological change. They transform at the rate of organizational change, right? And that's hard work. That's like months of training, of upskilling, of data, of governance, right? You're redesigning your workflows. This is the hard work. Like the technology is the easy piece, to be honest with you, right? And people think, okay, well, I'll just take it, buy it, and off we go. And this is, in my opinion, like strongly correlated with change management and adoption, 100%. There's no question about it. Like it's unequivocal. Almost every conversation I have with clients that struggle with is really, it goes back to change management and culture change, not technology change.
Absolutely. Do you have any do you suggest, when do you think you should bring someone from a change management team, or someone maybe external from the proposal department into the buying cycle? Do you think, is it best to bring in someone early to support that adoption?
No, absolutely. No, yeah, and also good observation, Michal, is you need to start engaging with the larger organization, whether it's like people from the SME community, for example, or from IT, that are really like, this is not just a bids and proposal problem. It's a sales problem or challenge. It's IT challenge, right? It's SME challenges, right? So you definitely need to get people on board and actually working toward this common goal, because what we're trying to optimize, for example, bids and proposal might be different than what sales is trying to optimize, right? So you want to get into a situation where everybody is on the same page as to what problem we're trying to solve collectively, right? Not a local optimization problem, but like a global optimization problem for the for the team, across the board. So yes, the earlier you get that, even before you engage change management, I think you need to engage stakeholders and get that buy-in. That's very, very critical.
Yeah, and I even from our perspective, like we've seen, like every sales cycle is a little bit different, and every organization that we work with is different. But there is a common trend when a corporate team is brought in, they get to value faster, because bringing in the new software, it's not always about the team that's going to use it. It could be engineering, it could be IT. Obviously, there's security impacts if it's a highly regulated space, and getting everybody on board and convincing them, but showing them the value that this is going to bring, just leads to better execution of the product. And you get to value a lot faster. Yeah. It scares me a little. You talked a little bit about AI agents. Now, it's not something that I have a whole lot of knowledge in with AI agents in particular, but when you start listing off the kind of criteria for AI agents in your presentation, and you talked about kind of clean workspaces, highly collaborative, like a dedicated workflow, very clear dedicated workflow, that doesn't really go hand in hand with the proposal industry. In my, like, a lot of the challenges about messy workplaces or undocumented workflows. Do you see a struggle with AI agents in this space?
Absolutely, and this is why I think it's not where you should start your journey. If you look at AI agents across other industries, where are the most like the applications that are getting traction and value? You think about like call centers, right? Where you have people calling in and wanted to get like answers to a set of questions, but those questions, there's maybe like, I don't know, 100 or even 1,000 that are bound questions, and you can use technology to say, if you get these questions, you're gonna get the answer. Like it's pretty obvious that the AI agents would do a better job, right? Like, but here, because of the different conditions, like so think about this. If you're bringing an intern, let's just say, we call AI agents like an intern that can do stuff. But like, if you can't tell them where to go find the data, what is the tone of voice and all these things that like you have to put the collaboration that's required. Like, how do we expect an agent if you don't have a library that's like, good governance? How is the agent going to figure out like which one to pick? Like, we make it sound it's like superhuman. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should not use AI agents. And I'm not against the technology, to be frank, right? But I think when somebody's trying to sell an AI agent, they might want to also explain the limited use cases currently in the specific industry or bids or type of bids, because otherwise it gets confusing, right? And so to your point, Michal, very good observation about like, if you get all these things right, then you might want to think about AI agents. So maybe you should start with like, a tool or even in like ChatGPT, get your things sorted first before you try to automate chaos, right? Like it doesn't really work very well. So yeah, absolutely. Not today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not today. No, not today. Chris, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to kind of just pass the ball back to you. Do you have any final words for the audience? How to get in contact with you, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, people will like to link up on LinkedIn. I'm very active. You can, send me a message. I love talking about this all the time. I love talking to people, understanding their pain points or their struggles. So yeah, if you want to link, hit me up on LinkedIn, or again, if you want to go on our website, there's a lot of free resources you can download and have a look as well. So, looking forward to more conversation. Again, thanks, Michal, and for inviting me for this, and I'm really excited about the future.
Absolutely. No, very good. Chris, really appreciate your time. For those who are sticking around and want to go to the next session, you actually have an option, which is good. It's always nice to have options. You're automatically going to be redirected to this session. So first of all, I'll explain this. So Kel from K2, she's a proposal manager. She's going to talk about creating executive summaries. There's mix of AI in here. There's storytelling, trying to talk to the customer's language. It's a really, really positive conversation. So if you'd like to watch that session, you can stay on the stream and you're going to be automatically redirected. There is a panel discussion on social value which is a UK focused panel. So Quincy is from an agency. She's going to be talking about social value. It's deeply connected to UK bids and proposals. If that's more of your interest, feel free to go back to the optimized landing page on the Visible Thread website, and you can click into that presentation. So that's also on in about 2 minutes. That's just about to start. Thank you all for your time. There is a survey on screen. If you would please take the time to kind of fill out that survey and let us know what you thought of this presentation, or if you have any other feedback, we'd be delighted to take it. Chris, thank you again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, Michal. Have a nice day.